We are hosting a series of community conversations this month. We will have one every Wednesday through the end of the vigil, which is December 22nd, and they will all be virtual. And we also have a number of rallies and events and actions that are taking place outside of the governor's mansion that began November 20th all the way through December 22nd. And our community conversations are designed for folks to learn a little bit about the impacts of incarceration in different ways and have an opportunity to connect with each other and share ideas and also take action to help make a difference. Um, I would like to introduce our facilitator for this conversation, Miss Sangria Noble, who is currently living in Charlotte, North Carolina, and is a organizer with the North Carolina Poor People's Campaign, and also a member and organizer with the North Carolina Second Chance Alliance. So I will hand it over to you, Sangria.
Oh, well, thank you, Keisha. That was a great introduction, and I don't need to really add much more. I'm just happy to be here, happy to be sitting on this panel, happy to be able to facilitate this group. And as you all know, we are here today to talk about a touching topic, really keeping families together. I am directly impacted. So, I have some shared experiences with, some of the folks and on this call today. So we are here on a very touchy topic on keeping families together. We know about the impacts of children of incarcerated and beyond incarceration. I share a lot of experiences with some of you all, as I said before, being incarcerated myself and now having a child that's incarcerated, as well as a grandson that has to live these impacts. We just want to talk today about the separation of families and the solutions that we may come up with to address that. And so today I want to introduce our panelists that we have. We have Miss Toya Potts, which is directly impacted, a parent and an organizer with Emancipation NC. We also have Miss Melissa Ratliff, which is the program director at Our Children's Place, Coastal Horizon Center, Incorporated. Then we also have Miss Elizabeth Simpson, which is the strategic director and attorney at Emancipation NC. So I just want to give you all a chance here to introduce yourselves and share the floor. We'll start with Miss Potts. You want to take a few minutes to share, introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Toya. Hey y'all. She, her pronouns. I'm an organizer for Emancipate North Carolina. I am an impacted parent who has been incarcerated and also has dealt with the child welfare system in Durham County, as well as incarceration in the Durham County Jail. And glad to be here, glad to share my experience and yeah, any ways to change and work towards reform and abolition. So, and you want
Yes.
to pass it or?
Oh, well, yeah, we can go with Miss Melissa.
Thanks, Sangria, and thanks to all of you for making some time this evening to be part of this conversation. As you heard, my name is Melissa Radcliffe, and I'm the program director for Our Children's Place, and we are a statewide program focused on community support for children who have an incarcerated or returning parent. So we do some in-prison programming and a lot of professional workshops for folks across the state in terms of helping them understand what they can do to help support kids who find themselves with a parent in jail or prison or a parent being released. So again, thanks for the chance to be here this evening. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for coming, Ms. Radcliffe. And then Ms. Simpson, Attorney Simpson.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Simpson. I use she, her pronouns. I'm an attorney. I work with a lot of people who are in prison, in jail, and therefore separated from their families, and also have some experience working with people in the child welfare system. And thanks for making the time to be here today and having me on the panel.
Yes, and so thank you all for joining us tonight and coming together on this very, very important topic. So tonight, I want to start with Ms. Potts. Ms. Potts, I just have just a couple questions for you. How are you doing? Are you doing all right tonight? Everything going well?
Yes, thank you for asking. I'm doing fine.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Well, you know, we all have some feelings, and you know, you and I, we have shared experience and shared feelings. And I know, you know, how it felt when I was incarcerated and being without my children. But I want you to share with, you know, everyone tonight, if you may, what were your feelings when you were incarcerated without your children? Now, how long were you incarcerated without your children?
Yeah, so just some background context. I was incarcerated for 8 months on a $250,000 bond. And I had never experienced jail. And that was my first time being away from my children, because prior to that, I was still having supervised like DSS visits. It's a indescribable feeling, being a parent and being away from your children after you've been with them like since they were born. And I think just the process of just, I would say just the amount of like mental fortitude that you have to have in order to just stay in a good space. Not only while you're not seeing your children, but you're also like in jail. So that atmosphere in itself, and then being able, like having to navigate like a case, and then not being able to see your children at all. I'm currently, even after I did get out after 8 months, and I got out on pretrial. And one of the first things I did was ask my social worker, could I restart my visits? So I was able to restart my visits with my older son. But that next year, I eventually had gotten my charges dropped, but the judge in my case, Shamika Reinhardt, did not allow me to have visitation with my children. And so my charges were dropped. So I spent 8 months of my life in jail, basically for no reason. And even if it was something I did do, I don't believe that jail is the way to it's just not the resolution for people. But I Judge Reinhardt ended up terminating my rights in my family case. So I haven't seen my children in over going on 4 years now. And my children are 7 and 6 years old. I have 2 boys. Their names are Mansa and Kimani. And I feel like the court really, since terminating my rights, it's like they gave me, like, my oldest is 7. So that means like legally, I have 11 more years I can reach out to my child till he turns 18. So it's like they gave me, an 11-year sentence almost, like I can't have any contact. I don't see my children. I don't get any pictures. I don't get any updates. And it's not easy, but I think I know, well, I don't think, I know that's why I do this work and why it's so important for me to share my story and to be able to just let people in on the experience of what is actually happening, and how we can work together to change it so other families aren't impacted how I've been impacted. And so, yeah.
Well, wow. When you were incarcerated, were there programs that were like floating around that you were aware of at the time? did you qualify for those programs like that will unite you in some type of way with your children?
So no, there weren't any programs that like actually were giving people access to their children besides there was the STAR and grad program, which is a cognitive behavioral and substance abuse program. And I didn't have any substance abuse problems, but I literally asked, like, can I sign up for the program just so, because at the end of the completion of the program, you would get a pizza party and you got to see your family and they could come in person.
Yeah.
So I asked my attorney, like, if I sign up for the program, are they gonna hold it against me? But the coordinator said that she could write a letter saying that like I didn't have any substance abuse problems. I just wanted to join the program simply so that I could see my son in person at the end of the completion of the program, which I was able to do. During the time, I also had multiple social workers. Like I had about, I think, 3 social workers or 2 social workers within those 8 months. Because during family, when you're in family court, the turnover for social workers is crazy. I had a lot during my time, but what was I saying? Oh, so they did allow me to have visitation with my oldest son. He came, I think, one time or twice, but he was so young that like he didn't understand like why he couldn't touch me between a glass. Like he didn't like understand like what is this? Like why can I see her but I can't touch her? I can hear her but I can't touch her. And that's what made me actually request to start a program, because I felt like it was more traumatizing for him to see me behind a glass and not be able to actually touch me. So
So that kind of like answered my third question, but I'm going to ask it anyway, and you can go into it a little more. What programs do you think should have been available for you?
I would just say I feel like in the jails it's like a waiting room. Like you're just sitting there waiting for trial. Like you haven't been convicted, you're just waiting and you wait. Like people are literally, I know there were some people in there for murder sitting there for a long time just sitting. And like I said, I don't agree with jail or prison, but for people to be sitting somewhere just because they can't pay a bill is like crazy. So when I initially did get into intake, they ask like, do you have any mental health problems? Is there anything that like you need or anything? And the only thing I said, I don't have mental health problems, but I'm like, I'm literally getting arrested for the first time. This will be my first time without my children. Like this whole thing is unfamiliar, and they didn't have therapy, which I thought was like so crazy. I'm like, you mean like there's no therapist in here? They didn't have therapy, and there just wasn't access. There wasn't a lot of support, especially not with like being able to see your children. Like if you didn't have support from your family, visitation was kind of hard. And then when we would get like lockdowns and stuff, like visitation just didn't exist like at all. Like you could only do phone calls, which is a whole nother thing, because then you have to have money on your books to
Yeah.
even to even be able to communicate with their family. So I would say it's a lot of things that I feel like need to be changed as far as programs and really getting support from the outside, being able to see your family, which really goes a long way. It really like helps your mental while you're in there, because that in itself is not easy at all.
Especially without that glass, it's something to have to, how you hold your baby through the glass. How you feel and touch and get that love through that glass. I think that should be changed a lot too with family visitation.
I
You know,
agree.
yes, yes. And Miss Potts, my heart goes out to you. I'm with you. I sympathize with you. I empathize with you. I'm you, you, me.
Thank you.
Together. And I'm so glad that you are here today, sharing your story, and also coming up with, sitting at the table to come up with resolutions for your story, for the others that's, may go through these barriers or similar barriers that we're going through. So hats off to you. It's
Thank
gonna work
you.
out. It's gonna work out, Miss Potts.
Thank you so much. Thank y'all for having me here.
Yes, ma'am. Miss Radcliffe. Yes, ma'am, Miss Radcliffe. Tell us, share with us about your programs. What type of programs, Miss Radcliffe, do you run for your youth with incarcerated program parents for youth?
Yeah, so most of our time is spent doing professional workshops across the state. So talking with folks in schools, whether that's social workers, after school providers, childcare providers, DSS in some cases, faith leaders, about ways that they can support children who have an incarcerated or returning parent. And the conversation really starts with even helping them understand that they do have children in their school, their after school program, sitting in the pews at their church, in their child care center. So really getting folks to move away from this sense of, well, not in my community, right? It's somewhere else, but it's not in my community. So a lot of it is that early education. And what folks often say is, my goodness, I've never thought about children of incarcerated parents. And it's not that I don't care, it's that nobody's ever asked me to think about them. So I always say that's my challenge to a group is, if you haven't, can you start? And what does that look like? And what I'll remind folks is that every time we see something online, we overhear a conversation, there's something in the newspaper or on the news about an adult being arrested, let's ask the question about, are there children being left behind, both in terms of the support they need and the support the relationship between that parent and that child needs. So that's a large piece of what we do. A smaller piece, but the one I think that usually catches people's attention, is that we have two different programs running in prisons right now, and not all of our prisons, just a few. We have a grant called FRESH, which stands for Family Reentry Support and Help, and that has us in 5 prisons providing parenting classes and case management, as well as connecting with families around reentry and recognizing that reentry involves folks leaving jail or prison, but also in many cases can involve their family. So looking at reentry, but it also has us working in 13 prisons to make their visiting spaces more child friendly. So you talk about visiting behind the glass or with that plexiglass barrier, and we assume that in prison it's not there and we don't have to worry about it. But if anyone has ever been to the visiting space in a prison, they oftentimes need some help. They're not very child welcoming or child friendly. And so we've put together a pretty comprehensive checklist of the ways that prisons can make their spaces more child, if not friendly, at least child welcoming. So that's happening at a number of prisons across the state. And then we are back doing Parent Day again at some prisons, not all prisons, but now that prisons are reopened, we are back doing Parent Day at some prisons, and that's an extended visit where we bring in lunch and arts and crafts and a book display and a photographer so we can do family pictures, board games, and really give families that time and space to be families. We have a whole crew of people that are there. We don't jump in, we're just there if families need us, but give them the space to be able to sit and talk, visit, laugh, cry, be kids and their parents in a way that they probably can't do during a regular visit. So those are the two sort of direct service pieces that were happening. Again, emphasis on the fact that they're not happening at all the prisons. They're happening at a select few. We'd love to see that grow, but at this point, they're at a certain number of our prisons across the state.
And you know, Miss Riley, that space that you all are providing is so important and it's so needed to that child of the income. Because while you were talking, I didn't mention it earlier, but I'm the child of the incarcerated parent as well. You know, I visit my dad from when my mom died when I was 7. I visit my dad from when I was 8 years old all the way up till I was 14. Then turn around to go to the same prisons to visit, you know, my son. And so I'm that child now visiting, you know, the parent that's locked up. But I've also been the parent that's locked. So that space is very much needed. Yes, continue to grow in more prisons, you know, continue to grow with that. Once you build a relationship with your parents and the children, are there ongoing opportunities for more involvement beyond incarceration?
Yeah, so the grant that we're working on has it built in that we're able to do 6 months of contact and follow-up and services after release. 6 months is clearly not enough, but it's much more that's what's in place right now. And it's recognizing that we can't just say to folks, hey, you're leaving, best of luck, we'll catch up with you later, but instead to say we can be with you for 6 months afterwards.
Okay.
Another piece of that, though, is we've got reentry counselors across the state doing amazing work, and I want them to continue doing amazing work. But I also really encourage folks doing reentry work to think about children and families, that the reentry conversation needs to be about housing and jobs and access to services and healthcare and transportation, the whole list. But it also needs to be about what does it mean for children and families, and what does it mean about the relationship between children and their parents, whether that parent is coming back to the home for the first time, living somewhere else, whatever the arrangements are, to recognize what it means for children and families to have that loved one back in the community, even if they're not back in the home with the children and families.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. That is very, it's very, very great to have all these programs, and we need many more. We need them to continue on for ongoing, improvement afterward to avoid, reentry or recidivism. Yes, ma'am. And
Yep.
also, yes, ma'am. Keisha has put in the chat, if any of you have any questions, please add them to the chat. We'll answer a couple before we go into a small group discussion. But Ms. Radcliffe, we will have more questions for you in our small group discussions. Yes, ma'am. Attorney Simpson, you ready, Ms. Simpson?
I'm ready.
Yes, ma'am. So you're down working in Durham County, right? Okay, so what type of changes to the county welfare practices that you are hoping to see down there in Durham?
Well, it's a variety of things, really, and just to bring together the two threads, right? The thread of parents who are incarcerated and therefore separated from their children, and then parents who are separated from their children because of child welfare, regardless of whether they're incarcerated or not. I think the problem is really the same, which is the state trying to solve what it sees as a problem, trying to control behavior of people through punishment and deprivation and isolation and alienation. And I don't think it's ever been that those methods work to build community, to build connection, to build a better place to live. And so when Durham County is doing those things, and what we have right now is a jail in Durham County that is even more, I think, locked down than when Toya was in there. Post-COVID, they have lost a lot of staff, and they really decided that lockdowns was the easiest way to run their jail. And so they were going to keep doing it. They have even fewer programs than they had when Toya was in there. I'm not someone who thinks that people should go to jail or prison. But if the state is going to go to the effort of locking someone up and putting them someplace, and then they're not even going to give them anything useful or constructive to do with their time, any way to spend their time in a way that would be fruitful for themselves or their families, or be able to build anything, I think that is completely just awful and torturous to do to people. With the child welfare system in Durham, like, there's a variety of things that they can do. I mean, you could look really big and look really idealistic and think about transforming the system to one that is just about giving care to people who need it. A lot of people who get caught up, it's because somebody reported them for something. Could be something to do with poverty, could be something to do with mental illness, could be to do with substance abuse, could be just, somebody had it out for them and reported them. I think most parents have struggles raising kids. It's a really hard job. It's a really hard thing to do. Things come up. And in particular, if there isn't the resources to have stable housing, to have stable food source, stable employment, like get you to school on time, like get all your clothes in order and books in order and everything in order, go to the doctor right on time. Like, if those things aren't happening, then maybe you're going to be more likely to be reported, but that doesn't mean you're not a solid family. And what you would need would be an influx of resources and assistance and love. It wouldn't be take your kids away or put you in jail. Like, that's what's going to make everything a lot worse and rupture that family unit. I think the most traumatic thing you can do to a child is to take that child away from their parents, away from the people who love them. And that's what our state is apparently trying to do over and over again to try and solve what it sees as problems with people, but they're just making that problem worse and worse and worse, and just breaking all the bonds that hold people together. And like bonds that hold people together is what makes society. And so if you're trying to break them as a state, like what are you even trying to do? I think it gives it away that what the state's trying to do is break people down so that they can control them. It's not trying to build them up so that they can flourish and have, make meaning in their lives. So that's a little rambly, but
yeah, but it's the truth. It's the truth. Family. I believe that the best place for a child is with his mom, with his family, with two parents. But if two parents is not working out, one good loving parent with that child with some support, is unification is a must. Unification is it's traumatic being without your children. It's traumatic, especially when you already struggling and you and your children together, struggling together. To be pulled apart, that's traumatic on you as well as the child, because we have 2 more minutes left for discussion. Miss Simpson, I don't want to take you out of your discussion time. What you think we can do to get more resources, more funds to better support the families with incarcerated parents?
I mean, I think the first thing we can do, right, is stop spending so much money on incarceration, on locking people up and keeping them, quote unquote, secure away from their families. I think that's a very expensive project that is not very useful. And we can divert those funds to things that actually authentically take care of people. And that looks a lot different. I think the way that families support each other, like when they're struggling, is closer to what we as a society, a community that come together and pool our resources through taxes, right? We can take care of people in the ways that they need to be taken care of. And that means, making sure they have something to eat, they have somewhere secure to live, they have good schools, they have, libraries and parks and community centers for their kids, that if somebody has a hard time, there's someplace safe that their kid can go and be cared for. And doesn't mean that they're going to be punished for taking advantage of that option of needing a break sometimes. So there's a lot of things that we can spend money on. And I think there's plenty of money available to do it if we stop locking people up.
That's right. Allocate more funds.
We discussed a lot of things. One was just having control. I think a main thing is having control of your local community and who you elect in the sheriff office, because they control the budget, they control everything that happens with inside the jail. And then just having that awareness piece of getting the information out to community and how they can support what is even happening. Because a lot of people don't even think about, like Melissa was saying, what happens to the children of those that are incarcerated, and just incarceration in general. So just being able to spread that knowledge and then getting the community to action, to push the sheriff, or to, when the election season comes around, to electing someone that is going to at least try to change things inside of the jail or prisons.
Thank you. And folks who were in the breakout room with Sangria, if there's someone who can share a little bit of your conversation.
Well, I'm going to let Mr. Banner share. Since I talk a lot, I'm going to let Mr. Banner share, because we talked about some good things and he brought up some good points. So
you did it too good. I'm over here slicing and dicing. You did it perfect. Please do it again if you don't mind. I appreciate it, though.
Okay, all right.
Thank you, Sangria.
Mr. Jonah, you share what went on.
Mr. Banner described, or his idea was building jails and prisons closer to communities where people are being taken from, or putting people in facilities closer to where they're being taken from, so that visitation is more accessible. He also mentioned organizing transportation options to make sure that children and families can safely go to and from detention centers, and then also to make sure that families and children who are visiting stay safe when they're entering and exiting the facilities, making sure that they don't go through the same entrances and exits as people who are incarcerated or coming in and out of the detention center for other reasons. Forgive me if I forgot anything.
And then I'm gonna add, we also talked about allocating resources where Attorney Jonah had brought it to our attention that there was $2 million getting spent in Chatham County. That's 12% of the county budget.
Right, $20 million.
20 million. Yes, 20 million. I'm sorry, $20 million. 12% of the county budget to go towards the jail and what, the prison as well? Mr. Caden? Is that
It
correct?
was that's the budget for the sheriff's department.
Sure.
And encompassed in that is the Chatham County Jail.
And so that much money, we could allocate some of those, some of those resources towards family unification, towards reentry, towards, because that's a lot of money. So those are some of the things that we were discussing in our big breakout.
Thank you. And I'll share briefly from the breakout room I was in. We talked about public education and narrative shift, thinking about if we're talking about wanting to support children, then that means that we want to support their families. And so having that as a focus. There was also just, it brought up a point about even where there are these places that may have like family visitation centers, that's a center that is set up where there's a lot of supervision that happens over families and a lot of resources going towards that when resources could go directly to families. And on kind of on that same side, even where there might be spaces set up like that where people could have visitation, then there's often a gap in terms of people having the resources and support or transportation to be able to get to those spaces in order to do that. And so thinking about what resources might be needed there. So I want to turn it over to you, Sangria. I think we're going to get back in to kind of call to action and next steps. And then I guess we'll see if folks maybe have any questions after that.
Oh man, we've heard a lot of good stuff tonight. I know I've took a lot of great notes here, and we all, right on point with it, in our breakout rooms and the transportation as far as for the children. So we all have some of the same theories on these solutions on how we can get this thing started. But we want to ask one more question from each of the panelists, Ms. Potts, Ms. Radcliffe, and Attorney, and Ms. Melissa Radcliffe, and our attorney that's here. We want to ask one more question. So what else can we do to bring awareness and support for keeping families together? For Ms. Tori, Ms. Melissa, and Ms. Elizabeth. What else can we do to bring awareness and support keeping families together? Ms. Potts.
I would say coming to things like this is a huge step. Sharing things that are happening in your community, within your networks, because I really think it really is about us. It's not about anybody else. So the more community that we get involved, I feel like the better. I'm not sure if I do have, I'm not sure when I was supposed to talk about this, Keisha, but I think at some point we're going to do a small call to action, or if people had the time to just send an email to the county commissioners. We came up with like a small template for people to just copy and paste and enter in like certain info. But just like really pushing like elected officials to start doing things that we need them to do. because without us, they wouldn't even be in the position that they're in right now. So yeah, I would just say just that push of community and working together, and really pushing the people who have the power to do the things that we need them to get done.
Yeah, I think we were going like allow you some space. You're gonna talk a little more about that after Ms. Ratliff answers the question as far as what can we do to bring awareness and support, because we do want to know about that petition and we want to sign that before we leave here. Ms. Ratliff, what are some of your thoughts if there is some way we can do?
Well, first of all, thanks to all of you, because you've got my brain whirling in a million different directions, which to me is a sign of a good event. But anytime I speak to a group, I usually have a half sheet that I pass out at the beginning that's people's homework assignment. And what I'll say is it's not traditional homework. I don't need for people to turn it in, but I'm going to give all of you a homework assignment. There are 4 places I would love for you to go back to your community and ask, what's being done in our schools? So what's the level of understanding with our social workers, our mental health professionals, our SROs, anyone in a school, the school nurses, the librarian, what's going on at our schools? Are they talking about this? What's happening at your local DSS? Are they putting visits in place to bring kids to visit their parents in jail or prison? And if they're not, why? I want you to check in with your local reentry folks, whether it's an LRC, a local reentry council, whether it's some other more informal group, and ask them, how are you considering children and families in the work that you're doing? Keep doing the amazing work, but think about children and families in those conversations. And then if you are part of a faith community, I want you to go back to your faith community and say 2 thumbs up for doing a jail prayer ministry or Bible study or worship service, whatever's happening. We need to keep doing that, but we can't forget about the people sitting in the pews who are saying, thank you for being in jail, going to jail to do a Bible study with my loved one, but we can't pay our electric bill because that loved one is sitting in jail. We need some help. So let's not forget about the folks sitting in the pews. So that's your homework assignment. Those 4 in your community. And then the final piece is to let's think about language. We are talking about moms and dads. We are not talking about inmates and perpetrators and convicts. And then we're not talking about X, any of those. I think if we start to recognize, and I know all of you are doing this, but as a reminder to community that words matter. And when we start talking about convicts, then we erase people. I would never say to a child, how's your con, mom, right? And yet that's what children hear. That's what my parent is. So let's think about language, words matter, because then we're talking about people, parents, moms, and dads. We're not talking about, I have a list of 13 words that we use to describe people in jail, prison. We're not talking about that. We're talking about people, parents, moms, and dads.
That's right. Them
These are my thoughts.
They don't look at their parents like as mine didn't, as that's mama.
Right.
You know, yeah. That's right. Language is very, very important.
Yep.
Yes. And so now, Toya, do you want to talk more about your about the petition so we can sign that?
So it's actually a Google Doc that has like a template of an email that you can send to the Durham County Commissioners. So they just put it in the link. So the link will have like, you can just copy and paste it and just include like any of the blanks that you see. So I think just like your name and your why, but everything else is already filled in. And then you can just address it to the email addresses at the top.
Okay.
Yes. So you can, hold on, let me pull it up. So yeah, you can definitely just change, like if you live in a different county, you can just put what county you live in and just say that you're in support of it. Because this is just to the Durham County Board of Commissioners based off of a report that the Durham Safety, Wellness, and Task Force did based on A&D recommendations.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. So were there any questions that anyone had or any desired comments that they want to make at this time?
I think the last thing I would add might have been said already, hold on. Is a newsletter.
Okay.
That might be a good way to keep everybody connected. When I was locked up, my mom had started a newsletter, and I was surprised, especially for people who don't get mail. That's one of the hardest things for somebody locked up is the lack of mail, the lack of pictures. So if it's some kind of way we could do a newsletter that offer encouraging words and pictures, keep them tied into any type of civic engagement that they can participate in, I think that'll be a good way to keep people connected, families.
Wow. I think
Also,
you got some ideas. You got some ideas. I'm sorry, someone was speaking?
yeah, my name is Amanda, and I'm the founder of Operation Stop CPS, a local organization in Durham, and just wanted to raise an action to Court Watch. So we are building power for a father. His name is Garnell, who has been fighting for his son to come home for 3 years after finding out that he had a son. So he didn't even know he had a son, has not been alleged to have abused and neglected his son, but still 3 years later, he's still fighting for his son. And now Durham County is trying to terminate his rights. And so as a community, we are trying to build power to Court Watch. He goes to court on December 14th at Durham County Courthouse, 510 South Dillard Street, 5th floor, courtroom 5C. Right now, the time is at 9 o'clock. And so we are just, again, inviting all the community out. Once we have a Pack the Court flyer, we can definitely send it out to the community, but just wanted to share that information so people could put it on their calendars. And if you are available, we're asking people to come out.
Okay. All right. Well, if there wasn't any other comments or things
Just really quickly, we have some resources that we'll share out after this event for folks who want more information about the work, particularly the work that Toya and Elizabeth have been doing, and other ways to connect with the work that Melissa has been doing, and we'll share that after this event.
Yes, and we want to thank everyone for coming. I just want to reiterate that how sensitive that this topic is for all of us. We look forward to being able to come together again as a whole to make a difference. And once again, there will be links for materials for Keeping Families Together conference available afterward. Thank you all for coming. I've learned a lot. Yes, and I hope to see you all again soon.